in the Civil War by Annie Reisenwitz. One of the most influential resources during the time of the Civil War was food. People did not understand how to properly prepare, preserve, or transport it to soldiers or civilians. Because of this, the lives of many American citizens were negatively impacted. First off, soldiers often did not receive enough food. There were few transportation methods, and the ones that they did have were unorganized and busy. As a result of this, soldiers did not receive enough food in time, and many men starved. Also, all trains and wagons were used for soldiers and not civilians, so citizens did not receive any food and had to rely solely on the resources in their area. Many soldiers deserted so that they could go home to provide for their starving families. This hurt the armies by giving each one less men to fight for their cause. It also made many people miserable and made them less willing to support the war. Another result of poor transportation was foraging. This was when soldiers would invade local towns and steal food and supplies from civilians' homes. It was an act of desperation, and many townspeople felt that they could not trust either army. As civilians began to lose hope in the armies, soldiers were discouraged because they lacked support from the people that they were defending. This hurt the overall confidence and performance of almost every soldier. Secondly, the preservation methods of this time period were weak and undeveloped. Armies used salt to preserve many types of meat. This was somewhat effective, but did not always prevent vermin from getting to the food. Rats, birds, and insects often got into the soldiers' food supply. Armies were not always aware of this and fed it to the soldiers. The animals that infested the food usually carried diseases that were then given to the men when they ate it. Breads and meat remained out in the open for long periods of time, too, so mold often grew on the food and it became stale. Both of these things resulted in many men becoming ill and hospitalized. As more food poisoning occurred, the number of men decreased, so the overall performance of each army was hurt because there was more pressure on the remaining men to do well. Finally, soldiers did not know how to prepare their food safely. They often reused grease, which was unhealthy and unsanitary. Also, the grease was always exposed to nature, attracting animals and insects to the campsite. Also due to unhealthy preparation, a large majority of men suffered from high cholesterol. This put them in an unhealthy physical shape and prevented them from performing to their full potential on the battlefield. Both armies were negatively impacted by the soldiers' harmful cooking habits. It put them at a disadvantage and affected the soldiers by permanently harming their health. So, all of these factors had a major impact on the lives of American citizens who lived during this time period. At the start of the Civil War, both the Union and the Confederacy were suddenly responsible for feeding an army. As a result of this, there was an extremely large increase in demand and use for food, so both soldiers and citizens had a limited amount. This changed their lives by resulting in a higher amount of starvation and illness. The distribution of food changed during this time period because it was prioritized, putting major government officials first, soldiers second, and town people last. This had an impact on government officials' lives by giving them more power over the war and country, and affected the other two groups by giving soldiers inadequate food for fighting and angering the citizens, which resulted in the loss of their support. Overall, food played a very large role in the Civil War. Transportation was not yet advanced, so rations were limited. People of this time period lacked knowledge of proper preservation, also hurting the soldiers' health. Many soldiers damaged their physical state because they were never educated on how to cook their food.